Well, this has been a wonderful summer to enjoy walking out in the yard and seeing pollinators, and it just makes the whole garden come alive. There's so much more reason, you know, if one thing's not looking good, you can just look over there, and if it's covered with bees, you have a reason to feel good about what you've been doing. And this time of year, a lot of the things that were blooming earlier in the summer, that big flush of summer bloom, is over, and so that means that the pollinators don't have as many choices. There are not as many places for them to go to find substance. And so you found some things that come through later in the fall that we can count on to help them go into their winter dormancy or hibernation nice and full and fat.
Exactly.
Just like a beer. So over here we've got something that's got fall colors. That you just think of fall sometimes as having that kind of yellow
the
color,
yellows and golds, yes.
Yeah.
These are two cultivars of Rudbeckia. Everybody's familiar with our native black-eyed Susan. These are a couple of cultivars. The small one here is one called Little Gold Star. This is a perfect one for a small space garden.
Yes.
Some of the downtown residences that just have a very limited area for planting, but want
Is it pretty hardy? Do you have to nurse it every minute? Is it relatively drought tolerant? Tell me what you know about it.
All of the Rudbeckias are quite drought tolerant once they're established. They do require regular watering until they get a good root system down.
So it would be a good one for a container because you didn't have to go out there 3 times a day. Once a day would be enough.
And it's not going to get as tall as you are, so it's not something that's going to overwhelm the container.
Okay.
Right next to it is something that's a little more in keeping with most people's knowledge of the black-eyed Susan.
Yes.
This one is just a common Rudbeckia fulgida, but it's a variety called Demii. The thing that sets this one apart is that it's immune to or resistant to downy mildew, which was a really bad problem in the upstate a few years ago.
Okay. But the foliage on that one is quite beautiful.
Spectacular foliage.
Even, not even looking at the top, it would make a nice statement in the garden just as a nice, full, handsome foliage plant, wouldn't it?
Just keep in mind that like most of the hardy Rudbeckias, it can be a little aggressive, so you're going to have to thin it out and dig it up, transplant it periodically.
Okay.
But that just means you have more flowers to enjoy.
Yeah. And then these just kind of have that fall aster look to them, and what a happy color to see this time of year.
Well, there's a reason that they look like fall asters, because that's exactly what they are. The two with the full blooms here, the double blooms, are part of the royalty series. We have Peter III and Henry III. I brought these because I was wanting to bring some plants that would emphasize the fall pollinators, and I did see pollinators on these, but I think they were just waiting in line to get to the other aster here. This one, and I'm not sure if I can say this on public television, but this is part of the Kickin series, Kickin Asters. This one is Kickin Lavender, and it's since it does have a much more open flower, it does attract particularly the smaller butterflies like the skippers and hair streaks.
Oh, that would be so pretty to see the butterflies on this. Wouldn't that just be lovely? Because we forget sometimes, and the grace that they bring. The bees are busy and but the butterflies, there's just something lyrical about how they move in the garden, don't you think?
I think so.
And do these overwinter nicely?
They overwinter nicely. In fact, I have one of the Kickin series in a container that came back just as beautiful this year as it was last year when my wife Laura planted it.
My goodness, and things in the container aren't quite as protected as something in the ground, so you can feel that this really would do well for almost any of us.
Yes, it certainly will.
It's just beautiful. And then this one is a little more full and loose. And who found this attractive, and who is this?
This is one of the Caryopteris, also known as Bluebeard. That particular one is Dark Night. It's a very popular. It's often marketed as a perennial, but it is almost like a woody shrub that dies back significantly in the winter.
Oh, so there still would be some above ground structure
yes,
there.
It blooms sporadically throughout the growing season. It's at its heaviest bloom in the fall, but they do bloom in the spring. Once they're done blooming, if you trim it back a little bit, it'll flush out with another flush of blooms in late summer, early fall. It's particularly attractive to bumblebees. And the bumblebees have to have lots of nourishment before they go into their winter torpor.
Yeah. And you said this one you practically had to clear the brush to get through to pick it up and put it in the car.
I had to argue with the bumblebees.
Yeah. They're relatively good natured.
Yes, they are. They had plenty of other things to go to.
And then down here we've got some, I think, some improved of the old Yarrows that everybody used to have.
There's the red one there is called Summer Wine. It's one of the milfoil Yarrows, and then the other one is one of the old standby cultivars called Moonshine. It's got really pretty silvery foliage that contrasts nicely with the dark greens in the rest of the garden, and those bright yellow flowers just jump out at you.
Now, do they want a well-drained situation?
They like moisture when they're getting established, but they do need good drainage. They're extremely drought tolerant once they have a good root system established. But if you plant one in compacted soil, make sure that you amend the soil liberally all the way around to break it up a little bit so that it can get good drainage so those roots can penetrate.
And of course, up where you are, you have that red clay that you have to deal with sometimes. Yeah. And then we've got another tall fellow down on the end, just rounding things out.
That's just another cultivar of good old Joe Pye weed. Some of the old timers call it back to school plant because it's in full bloom when the kids have to go back to school. That one is a Eupatorium dubium. It's one called Little Joe because it's not as little as Big Joe.
It's not as big as, it's smaller than Big Joe. And then you said there's one that...
There's one called Baby Joe that tops out about 4 feet. There's Gateway that'll get about the same size as this one. Eupatoriums are a fairly extensive genus, everything from the native American boneset to the newer cultivars of Joe Pye.
Okay, and so the little one lets the kindergartners know when they have to go back, and the great big ones for the high school students.
Right.
Okay, so everybody does have to go back to school.
Yes, eventually.
Okay. Well, we're so glad that you came down today and gave me school on the podcast, and brought all these wonderful plants from your nursery. South Pleasantburg Nursery, right there on
South Pleasantburg Drive.
Pretty easy to find.
Right on the banks of the Reedy River.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.